My name is Lindsay Song. I am the director of the Technology Facilitated Abuse Initiative at Sanctuary for Families, which is New York's largest provider of civil legal services and related services to survivors of gender-based violence. So we provide legal services, clinical services, economic empowerment work, and also legislative advocacy for survivors of gender-based violence here in New York. And I also chair the New York Cyber Abuse Task Force, which is a coalition of nonprofit organizations, providers, clinicians, survivors, lawyers, advocates, some law enforcement, civil attorneys, all along the intersection of technology facilitated abuse and gender-based violence. For a long time now, we have been fearful that the advent of, advanced AI and digital technologies would transfer into the courtroom. And we are increasingly seeing this in the context of court proceedings. I am a family court attorney, so I've been practicing for almost 11 years now in New York City family courts, but I also assist with criminal justice advocacy in the criminal courts and do related civil proceedings as well. And we have been seeing an increase in both the creation of false digital evidence, i.e., mostly photo-based evidence, but we've also been seeing even not so advanced technology being utilized, like spoofing, which I'll talk about in a second, to impersonate and show messages that appear as if they are from one person, but really they're from another person. And the damage, I think, that can be caused from this misuse of AI and digital technologies is really incalculable for several reasons. One is simply the difficulty of people having these cases going forward and being able to put forward their evidence and then having evidence coming in from the other side that is manipulated. So I can go into a couple examples of these forms of evidence that we're seeing. One is I had a case last year where a client had an abuser that she had met online, and she'd actually never met this person in person. And he created a very realistic, somewhat realistic looking image of them together to claim that they had been in a relationship and that everything that she was saying was lying. But his mistake was that he created multiple copies of this picture. And in doing so, he used different AI tools, it appears, because the pictures looked totally different. So his face and her face did not appear to be the same in the photos. And so we were successfully able to rebut that evidence from coming in. But even recently in New York State, there was a Court of Appeals decision that called into question the use of evidence in cases of specifically video evidence, and this was in the context of a child abuse case, where there's now concern and fear over authenticating evidence because of the arguments that the evidence may be deep faked or it may be synthetic, it may be not true and accurate evidence. And for a long time, we've seen the use of spoofing technology to basically spoofing is just impersonating, making, again, something look like it is from some source, even though it's not. So I could get text messages that say they're from my mom, but really they're not. But it would appear on the phone that they are from my mom. They're her phone number, but they're using a special spoofing technology, which is actually widely available. A lot of these websites are easily available for download or usage. And it really makes it very difficult to move forward these cases for victims, but it also undermines the victim's own credibility in court, which is a huge problem because then we're also seeing defenses being used of authentic evidence coming in and then abusers saying, well, that's deep fake, that's false evidence, and undermining the credibility of our clients in the courtroom for these domestic violence situations. Yes, I think a big part of the problem is, not only the defending against the use of this AI evidence in the cases from like when the abuser is putting in this evidence, but also they're putting in their own evidence and the fear that the evidence that they are putting in is not accurate. So I had a case a couple years ago with an abuser who was claiming that all of the evidence in my client's cases, it was a child support case and it was regarding payment. But my client had many messages from the abuser saying that he had money, that he was refusing to pay it, and bragging about all of the cars he had and the boats and all of the money that he had that he was not going to be paying her. And so we admitted this into evidence to show that he was willingly not paying the child support which he was owed. And in doing so, he then claimed, well, no, actually, all of those pieces of evidence are fake. They're manipulated. They're AI. And he created a text message that he said, look how easy it is to create a fake text message. And he put in evidence a fake text message that said it was from the court, that said, from family court, your case has been rescheduled, to show how easy it is to create this fake evidence. So we're seeing, I mean, in that case, it was again not successful for him because all he proved to the court was that he knew how to create fake evidence. But we are seeing that being increasingly utilized to say, well, no, that video of the client being assaulted, or this picture of an injury, that's manipulated evidence. That is, and I think that that is honestly the scarier part for advocates and attorneys, is having it being weaponized against our client. We've also seen spoofing and impersonation, for a long time, but because of the technology being used increasingly and more adeptly by abusers. We're seeing it coming up in cases more. So there was a case out of New York about a year and a half ago where an abuser was arrested. He was a criminal defendant in a case for an order of protection case. And he had criminal violation of an order of protection. And then he goes to the police to say, look, I got this message from the mother of my children. And the message said essentially that she was going to kill herself and the children. And she was arrested, and the children were removed from her care. And it took several weeks of investigation from the DA's office and from the police to identify that this was actually not her. This was not a message that was from her. It was actually a phone number that was associated with him. And so while not digitally spoofed evidence, digital manipulated evidence, similarly utilizing technologies to manipulate or to, appear that the evidence is not what it is meant to be. In this case, this woman lost access to her children, and had it not been for some sufficient investigation, that could have gone on for even longer, but the damage was already done. And so we're really seeing the spread of AI and the use of these types of technologies being very dangerous. In addition, I haven't even spoken about, the proliferation of these AI type tools to manipulate and create non-consensual intimate images, which I know has been addressed previously many times, but we are increasingly seeing this in court as well, to be used as a form of abuse itself. As an attorney, I think that going back to the principles of evidence authentication is really important and really critical, while also acknowledging that there needs to be changes and trainings and additional remedies available to really inform not just attorneys, but also judges, advocates, law enforcement, all along this space. So as an attorney, when I give trainings on evidence and authentication, really go back to, how do we know that this item is what it appears to be? And I think it's really important that attorneys are up to date on these issues, are really versed in being able to discuss what this manipulated evidence could look like, how it's being done, and how do we know that this is not a piece of evidence. So going back to, simply what other evidence do we have to show that this is an authentic piece of evidence if you're bringing it in from your own side, right? So what other, do we have other photos in the same time period that we can use to support that this is just one photo of many that were happening in the same time, like a photo of an injury and then a photo of the client that's not injured, to show that it was happening in the same time period and it appears to be the same. Other testimony as well, or other witnesses that can authenticate, because ultimately it goes back to credibility of our client. Is our client's story more credible? And we're able to kind of use that just using building blocks, just like you would in a case. So in some ways, taking down the tech level of bringing it back to, listen, there have always been, misuse of evidence, or people trying to put in evidence that is false or mislead. That has been going on since the court system has. So going back to those principles, but also acknowledging the importance of training and advocacy, which I am lucky to be able to do at Sanctuary for Families, to train law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, and dispatchers on this subject in New York, but making sure that in all jurisdictions and globally, that those groups are educated on the risk of AI and the risk of manipulation, while also remembering to believe survivors and to look at the entirety of the situation and look at the entirety of other evidence and other witnesses to show what's really happening in that scenario, and not to simply go based upon one piece of evidence, whether it's manipulated or not. I think that the there's a misconception that as technology advances, that the rules of the game are fundamentally altered, right? That things are totally different and we need to have a completely fresh perspective. As I always say in my tech trainings, this is just new forms of an old harm, new forms of the same abuse that we've seen for many, many years, really since, but before tech was even utilized in these cases. And so going back to the same things that we advise survivors on, which is, evidence collection and utilizing the tools that they have with family, friends, support systems to identify what forms of evidence may be helpful to them, to use screenshots, to use other forms of, digital collection where they can. Because really, at the end of the day, again, it all goes back to the credibility of your story and the credibility of the case. And the only way that we're able to show that in court ever is just a well-supported client, one that has been able to identify what forms of evidence they have, and where it is. And that's still the rule. That's still the rule of the game. And having new forms to manipulate and change evidence really doesn't change that. It just makes it easier. But we've been, rolling with the punches in domestic violence for many years now, and I am confident that we will continue to be able to advise clients in this way. And I hope people feel empowered that you can still, prepare a case and be believed. It just is going to take a little bit more attention to detail and maybe a little bit more prep work on the front end.